Hey World Civilizations, Mr. Lassiter here, and in this video we're going to be looking at environmental and demographic challenges in the world today. Environmental, meaning having to do with the environment. Demographic, meaning having to do with people in our population. So let's take a look at our video goals real quickly. We want to see what the world's population growth looks like and what challenges it poses to our world today. We're going to look at some trends in migration patterns. We want to find out what something called the Green Revolution was and how that helped the population growth in the world or increased population. And then also look at some of the environmental challenges that we face moving into the future. This is a pretty interesting map here to the right, basically the entirety of human history and the population of the world, which was under 1 billion until, well, pretty recently, and now is over 7 billion. So world population explodes in the 20th century, and this is due to several factors. One being the abundance of food that we'll see post-World War II, but also better medical care. And so it's not that people are having more children necessarily, which is leading to this population growth, but that people are living longer and actually living to the age where they can have more children. So for example, average family size in Europe hasn't necessarily grown, but more children that are being born are living to ages when they can have more children. And so this is increasing our population. Most of the world's population growth is actually seen in the developing world, and the graph there on the bottom shows that. Pretty much over the last 60 years or so, the population of industrialized countries has pretty much stayed the same with a little bit of growth. But countries that are non-industrialized or are still industrializing, they're seeing the biggest population growth. And that's because they are seeing the biggest gains in health and in a lowering of their infant mortality rates. So the population of these countries is still growing, and if the current rates hold, about 95% of all future population growth will be in these developing regions, particularly in Africa and Muslim countries of the Middle East and Indonesia, etc. The current world population is about 7.125 billion with a B. We expect to reach 8 billion by 2025, if not sooner, and a population of about 10 billion by 2100. So some of you who live to be about 100 years old will see this population hit 10 billion. I most likely will not. But these are kind of the big trends that we see. Huge population growth due to increase in health care and the lowering of the infant mortality rate, and that most of this growth is in these non-industrialized, or these, as we call them, developing or third world countries. So where are these people living and moving? Because we have to have places to put these people. And the dominant trend in our world population migration has been from rural areas to cities. And you'll see this on a chart on the next slide. And this movement from rural or farming areas to urban areas or cities has really accelerated since about 1950. This growth of cities, especially in the developing world, has placed heavy burdens on basic services that you would expect out of a city. Trash collection, sanitation, other sanitation work, electricity services, water, etc. It's also led to the growth of slum areas, which are poorly put together housing, sometimes on the outskirts of cities, sometimes in cities, and several other problems, including crime, etc. Other trends that we see in the world today is immigration between countries, of course, as travel and trade becomes, or it continues to grow with technology. And so we see things like immigration from Latin America to the United States, or from Africa to Europe, especially after 1960 when many of those countries become independent. So these are some of the major trends that we see. Also, there's a major trend of migration or immigration from the Muslim world to Europe as well, which has increased some tensions in the region. But overall, this map shows you the top 10 origin countries of international migrants. And so you can kind of see where people were moving from in 1990 and where they're moving from in 2013. Of course, population growth leads to challenges, and the first one being the overcrowding of cities. And here's the graph I was mentioning. This shows the growth in the percentage of the population of people who live in urban areas in the red, or cities, and the population of people who live in rural areas or the countryside in blue, and the total world population. And you see that basically in the past 10 years or so, the urban population now has outgrown rural population, and that gap will continue to widen, we expect. This has led to overcrowding in cities, deforestation in order to build housing, issues in feeding and employing these large populations. What do you do with these people if you don't have jobs for them? Economic strains on the government in order to support them, and other things. We see a widening gap between the rich and the poor, rich nations and poor nations, as these economic strains are placed on governments and people. And these are just some of the big trends that we see. Now, how do we feed all these people? How are we getting this huge population growth and this boom in health? And a lot of it traces back to something we call the Green Revolution, an increase in food production and crop production in countries, achieved kind of through the use of fertilizers, pesticides, and high-yield crop varieties. The development of new strains of rice, corn, and other grains basically yield more per acre than they would have in the first half of the 20th century or all of human history. So we kind of have manipulated these crops in order to produce more, in order to feed more people. This boom basically occurs between 1940s and 1960s and still goes to this day. In fact, here in RTP, we have companies that research how to create higher yields in these crops. And they research pesticides to use to make these plants produce kind of maximum amounts without being attacked by bugs, what have you. Some of the drawbacks, of course, to this include the use of chemicals, an increase in cost. Some farmers can't even afford to plant these crops. Some of these companies have copyrights actually on the new strains of rice or corn that they are creating, and so they're charging high prices for farmers to get the seeds to plant these. And then also ecological disruption, as people have to farm more and more to keep up with the world population. It leads to clearing land and clearing habitats. Other environmental challenges we see are kind of laid out in the field of ecology, which is the study of the relationship between living things and their environment. And this field of science has grown over especially the last 50 years and made people more aware of the environmental problems we face, including pollution, clear cutting of land to make room for housing or for farming, ozone depletion, the production of carbon, or the byproducts of carbon. Also climate change and global warming, which I'm not going to go over in too much detail. You do get that a lot in science, but if you look at the graph to the right, we do see that the 5-year average of our temperatures in the world are going up. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's causing great changes in our weather and our climates and what we expect year in and year out. And also we see habitat destruction. Of course, as land is cleared, we're losing land that has been traditionally the home for some of our most beloved animals of the world, and so on. So these environmental challenges increase as we try to make room for this population growth as we get further and further into our 21st century. And as you'll see in the news, as you see debated, these are some of the big issues that face our world and your generation moving forward. Here are our video goals. Make sure that you can answer all these questions and come ready to learn a little bit more tomorrow. Have a good day.